Everybody, welcome to the video. It's Tuesday, July 6th, and we're breaking down this 14-game slate that we have over on DraftKings today. It would have been a full-on 15-gamer, but the Indians and Rays game did get postponed due to the weather coming into Florida today, but it's still a 14-gamer, 28 teams to talk about, lots of good options, and it's Jacob deGrom Day, so it should be a pretty fun slate. I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure you guys are as well. And if you do find this video helpful in any way possible, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you want to follow me over on social media, I'm at Pennell16 on Twitter and CPenn16 over on IG. And if you want to help support the channel over on Patreon, get access into this colorful data sheet that I have behind me, which has all the players listed, not just what I show you guys on YouTube, and the projections, optimizer rankings, cheat sheets, data sheets, Discord community, all that fun stuff. I do cover other sports. Link is down below in the description. But I think that's it for the plug, so without further ado, let's dive into today's video. And as per usual, we'll start with the pitchers and move on to the bats. And up top today, we have an obvious option in Jacob deGrom, $11,500. Yes, he's a bit expensive, but the way pitching is and the way the slate is, it's still not that hard to fit in Jacob deGrom, and you better find a way to do it. I think DraftKings should personally start pricing him like above $13,000 to at least make it a question if we can fit him in or not. But $11,500, I mean, you could just fit him in, then throw in like an 8K or 7K pitcher, and it's just really easy to do so. Last time we were able to play Jacob deGrom with like Corbin Burns, and yeah, it was pretty expensive, but you know, DraftKings just makes it way too easy this year to play expensive pitchers, and Jacob deGrom is by far the best pitcher in baseball. He looks like the best pitcher of all time, the way he's been pitching this season. So yeah, find a way to play Jacob deGrom. If you're not playing Jacob deGrom today, I mean, you're just really hoping he gets hurt or something early on. And yeah, he kind of struggled in his last start early on, but then he struck out like 10 in a row, it felt like. I know he didn't strike out 10 in a row, but it felt like it. Ended up having a really solid game, and he gets a great matchup here versus Milwaukee. We just saw Tyler McGill have a good game versus them, and if he could do that, I'm pretty sure Jacob deGrom can. Only a 2.6 implied team total here for the Brewers, 70% chance for a win, and his numbers this season look like an absolute video game. Like, I can't even put these numbers up on the show. That's just how good he's been this season. Less than a 1 ERA, 1.6 xFIP, 1.7 Sierra. Striking out nearly half the batters he's seen this season, over 14 Ks per nine, and just about a walk per nine. Doesn't give up power whatsoever. I mean, what do you want me to tell you about Jacob deGrom? The guy is the best pitcher in baseball. There should be no questions asked there. And it's a good matchup versus Milwaukee. I'll play the guy in tough matchups, but when you give me a good matchup like Milwaukee, it just makes me even happier. They're striking at over a 25% clip this season. Two righties, 83 WRC plus, and a WOBA below 300 with only 148 ISO. Would not be surprised if we see double-digit strikeouts here from Jacob deGrom, and he is by far the best pitcher play on the entire slate. Find a way to play him. And then dropping down to some SP2s to pair with Jacob deGrom, we have quite a few options here. We'll start with Ian Anderson, $8,600, and I believe he was pitching the last time that Jacob deGrom pitched. Ended up having 2 strikeouts in that game, so it wasn't a great overall fantasy day, but it's a good spot here versus Pittsburgh. They're a team that doesn't really pose much of a power threat. It's not the greatest strikeout matchup in the world because Pittsburgh's kind of stingy, and Ian Anderson's got an okay strikeout rate. It's around 25%, which compared to Jacob deGrom, it's about half his strikeout rate, so it's obviously not going to look that great, but for $8,600, it's not terrible. 3.5 xFIP, 3.9 Sierra, 3.3 ERA, doesn't give up much power, on 118 ISO this season, gets about 50% ground ball rate, which is pretty good, only 30% hard contact rate, less than a homer per nine. And as I was saying, the Pirates are just really not that much of an imposing offense. Yes, there's a couple of stingy batters, but 123 team ISO, about an 8% walk rate, 291 WOBA, 85 WRC plus. I wish they struck out more, but I think Ian Anderson should be fine today. I think he's going to limit the runs and probably going to pick up the win because the Braves offense is in a pretty good spot versus Pittsburgh today. And it's also a pitcher-friendly park over in Pittsburgh as well, and only a 3.81 implied team total against him, and a pretty heavy favorite. Dropping on Castillo here, he's only $100 cheaper, and he's definitely been pitching better than he has earlier in the season. Earlier in the season, the guy was a punching bag, getting absolutely lit up, it seemed like every single start. I kept playing him too because he was cheap and just kept not working out, but he's been playing a lot better recently, so if we want to ride the hot hand a little bit, I think Castillo's fine here. No team total out yet for the Royals fight. I guess it's probably going to be upper threes. Cincinnati bullpen's not the greatest thing out there, and the Royals offense isn't terrible. I mean, there's some good bats in there, like Carlos Santana, Salvador Perez, and a couple of other guys. So I wouldn't say it's an absolute cakewalk matchup here for Castillo. And his numbers in the season obviously aren't going to look super impressive. His strikeout rate's only all the way down to around 21%. In the past, we've seen that around 30%. So it's been way down this year. ERA is above 5, but the exit's below 4. Sierra's in the low 4s. I mean, the walk rate's pretty high too, but he gets a lot of ground balls. Doesn't really get too much balls in the air. Only a 22% hard contact rate as well. He's getting away from Great American Small Park, so it's going to be a boost for him, although the Royal Stadium's really not the greatest thing to pitch in, but it is better than Cincinnati, so we'll give him that. But not my favorite option here, probably definitely a GPP option, but he is viable on this slate. I just think Ian Anderson's in a much softer spot. And then a couple of cheaper options here in the 7K range. We have Dan Dunning, $7,400. He used to be cheaper, like in the 6K range, which always made him a decent value play. But he gets a good spot here versus Detroit. I always thought he was a little bit too cheap in the 6K range. I always thought he's kind of like around the 7K pitcher, so I'd say he's priced appropriately here. But his numbers are okay in the season. I mean, it's a good spot versus Detroit here, and I do like the Rangers stack quite a bit today, so I think he could pick up the win if he happened to get that 5+ innings. And the 4-point bonus would be pretty good at $7,400. But on the season, he's got around a 24% K rate, pretty good 3.6 xFIP, 3.8 SIERA. Keeps the ball on the ground around a 55% ground ball rate. The hard contact rate's not pretty at 37%, but less than a homer per 9. And the Tigers' offense is nothing too scary. I know they had a good game yesterday, but they still strike out 9 times versus Allard, I believe, which I'm surprised he worked, guys. I saw some people talking about him, and I'm not really sure I'd want to go to Allard. I mean, the strikeouts got him there. Way to give up a handful of runs, but it's a good spot overall versus Detroit. They're striking out over 26% of the time versus righties. They're worse versus lefties. They do have some okay numbers versus righties in terms of the WOBA being above 300 and the WRC plus is above 90, which is actually the best of all 4 offenses we're going to talk about here. Talking about the Brewers, Pirates, Mariners, and the Royals, but still 91's not that great, and I think Dane Dunning should be fine at $7,400, especially if he can pick up the win. He's only throwing 80 pitches per game this season, but I think the price point is fine, and team total below 4 against him, and he's a pretty heavy favorite. And then Jameson Taillon, $7,200 against Seattle. I don't really like playing Taillon too much. The guy does have a bit of a homer problem, giving up nearly 2 homers per 9 this season with a 45% fly ball rate, but pretty soft spot here versus Seattle. The ERA is ugly at 5.5 this season, but the xFIP's at 4.5, Sierra's in the low 4s. Strikeout rate's sitting around 25%, doesn't really walk too many guys. Again, he does give some power, but you don't really have to worry about that too much with Seattle. They don't have much threats in their offense, and on the season, they have a 26% K rate to righties, 160 ISO, 294 OBP, 90 WRC+. I mean, it's a pretty soft matchup, kind of similar to what Dane Dunning's in, where these pitchers aren't the most reliable guys in the world, but they do draw soft matchups. So, I mean, they're playable with their price points if you need to get some more expensive bats in your lineup. Plus, I like the Yankees stack quite a bit, so if Taillon can go those 5+ innings, I think he should be in line for the win as well. But that's kind of it for the pitching. After Jacob deGrom, things get a bit murky, but we're going to have to pick one of these guys, so there's some other options too. Like, it's a 14-game slate, so if I don't mention someone you like, there's a chance I do like them. I just want to talk about everybody on this slate. So with that being said, we'll move right over to the bats. And it's a pretty good bat slate, so I'm looking forward to talking about these guys. We'll start up top with the catcher position. We have JT Realmuto with $3,700. He got the day off yesterday. His replacement, Andrew Knapp, went deep. So if you played him, just looking for a cheap replacement catcher, obviously it worked out pretty well for you. The Phillies ended up exploding for 13 runs. That game was pretty stagnant for a while, but at the very end, Phillies absolutely popped off. And assuming Realmuto is back in the lineup, he is way too cheap. Phillies are one of my favorite stacks on the slate tonight. We have the wind blowing out once again in Wrigley, not quite as much as yesterday. I saw a couple balls get carried by that wind. I believe it was Marisnik. He kind of hit like a line drive, and it just ended up kept going and got a homer out of it, if I'm remembering correctly. But anyway, assuming Realmuto is back, he's way too cheap, $3,700. I mean, team 12 above 5 here. Jake Arrieta is not a very good pitcher. I prefer lefties versus him, but Realmuto is one of the better hitting catchers in baseball. He's probably the way you're going to want to go in cash games if you got the money for it, but he's not that expensive. Dalton Varsho, $2,600 left and righty matchup here versus John Gray, who shows signs of being good sometimes, but he's a pretty average pitcher, and 4.5 fly team total for the Diamondbacks is actually pretty good for them. Typically not that high, and Arizona's not the worst place to hit, so I think Dalton Varsho, if you're just looking for a dirt cheap catcher, left and righty matchup here, I think he's fine. I prefer lefties versus John Gray. Then Jonah Heim, $2,500. I prefer lefties versus Jose Urena, but the Rangers have a team 12 above 5 today, which you can't say too often. But Jose Urena is not a very good pitcher. Detroit bullpen, it's not as terrible as you think, but it's still not exactly great. And I think the Rangers make for a decent stack today. Not sure if they're going to be chalky or not. It's still too early to tell, but I think they grade out pretty well for me, and I like that price point quite a bit, $2,500. Plus, he doesn't hit too far down in the order, which you can't say for a lot of catchers. Then going to first base, we have Vlad, $6,200. The Blue Jays do not have a team total out yet. I saw a couple places saying Plutko could start. I saw DraftKings has Dean Kramer, so I guess we'll have to see on that. But either way, it's going to be a good spot here for the Blue Jays on the road in Camden Yards, which is one of the best places to hit in baseball. You get the guaranteed 9th inning at bats. So you can sign me up for pretty much all the Blue Jays. No team total out yet, like I just mentioned, but if I had to guess, I could see it being above 6 today. It would not surprise me, but it should definitely be in the upper 5s. Definitely going to be a good spot for the Blue Jays, one of the better offenses in baseball, and you can get on the road in Camden Yards, it's going to look pretty good for your offense. I realize he's very expensive, but his numbers are insane this season. I mean, 468 WOBA, 340 batting average, around a 350 ISO, 200 WRC+. I don't think you guys need me to tell you that Vlad's good at hitting baseballs, because he really is. And a couple of cheaper options here in the mid-range. We have Luke Voigt, Nate Lau. No, it's Brandon Lau, than Nate Lowe. I always get those two confused. But Luke Voit, $4,200, just some righty power here versus Justice Sheffield. I think the Yankees are one of the better stacks to target today. I think as of right now they have the highest team total, but I assume that's going to change once we get the Blue Jays total out yet. But 5.23 here going up against Sheffield. Not a very good pitcher, very average at best, pretty much below average. And Voit, he's got some pop versus lefties, so I don't mind him. Then Low here, $4,200, just some lefty power versus Jose Urena. Guy's not the greatest player out there, but I mean, should be hitting high in the order. Team total above 5. I think those Rangers look pretty good today, especially the lefties. Then going to second base, we have Marcus Semien, $5,600, pretty expensive, but he's been doing it all this season, batting around 280, 242 ISO, 520 slugging. Should be hitting at the top of the order for pretty much the best stack on the slate tonight. Then DJ LeMahieu, you could also play him at third base, pretty expensive. So I mean, at this point, I'd rather just get up to Semien, but I think for cash games today, you just play Gene Segura, save some money there. That's going to help you afford DeGrom today and another, semi-expensive pitching option because we don't want to play any of those 5K pitchers today. But LeMahieu, just already on the matchup here. High contact guy, doesn't really hit for a lot of power this season, but high team total and just part of a good Yankee stack. Then Gene Segura, $3,300, kind of like the only Philly didn't do anything yesterday. I know he had a walk at some point, but I don't think he got a run. He might have, but I just remember him getting a walk yesterday. But he's dirt cheap, hits at the top of the order. Jake Arrieta kind of sucks. And he's batting .332 this season. Not a lot of power, obviously, but guy that can get on base, and he's just dirt cheap. And I like that wind blowing out a little bit. Again, nothing too crazy. I think it's only 10 miles per hour, but it's still going to be a little bit of a boost for them. And I like the Phillies quite a bit today. Hopefully they can stay hot. Kevin Biggio, $4,300. I think we're dropping on third base now. So just going down to third base here. I didn't really like any of the expensive guys. I mean, you can roster them like Manny Machado, Rafael Devers. They're fine if you have the money for them, but didn't really see myself spending up too much for third base today. But Kevin Biggio, just lefty on righty matchup here versus potentially Dean Kramer and Camden Yards, like all the Blue Jays. Austin Riley, $4,200. So I don't have many. I think he's the only Atlanta Brave I have listed here, but you can play all of them pretty much. I wouldn't have an issue with that. Freddie Freeman, Anthony Albies, Ronald Acuna, they're just kind of expensive. But Austin Riley batting cleanup here, $4,200 versus Chad Kuhl, team total above 5 today. Don't think that's an issue. I mean, this guy's got plenty of power versus either lefties or righties. Gets a high fly ball rate as well. I think all the Braves are in play. They're just pretty expensive, but Austin Riley is fairly priced. Then I'm kind of struggling to find a cheaper third baseman, but I threw Starlin Castro in here, $2,100 versus Ryan Weathers. I mean, I don't think Weathers is terrible, but it's not like I'd run from the hills from him. And the guy's, decent batter versus left-handed pitching, always has been. Like on the season, he's batting .251, but versus lefties specifically this season, he's batting .323. Obviously, not a lot of power, and he will strike out quite a bit. But I think at $2,900, he's worth a shot if you just need a guy that hopefully can get a couple of singles or something like that. Then dropping down to shortstop, we have Tatis, $6,200. I'll pretty much always list Tatis every time he's on the slate because he's always going to be in play no matter who the pitcher is. Looks like it's going to be Jeffrey Rodriguez here for the Nationals. No team total out yet for the Padres, but can't imagine it's going to be too low here versus Rodriguez. So if you got the money for Tatis, it's never an issue to go with him because he's one of the most reliable fantasy players in baseball. He can do pretty much about anything. He can steal bases, hit dongers. I mean, do just pretty much everything. So if you got the money for him, great. If you don't, I don't think he's a must play, especially since Didi Gregorius is pretty cheap today, and he had a good game yesterday. But I mean, the numbers are great for Tatis. Over 400 ISO this season, 700 slugging. It's like, what more do you want out of the guy? Bo Bichette, $5,900. If you're spending up for shortstop, both these guys look pretty good today. Bo Bichette, probably like the Blue Jays offense a little bit more, so I could maybe see myself landing on him more, especially if you're just stacking, but like all the Blue Jays today. Then Didi, $3,600. He's probably going to be your cash game shortstop today just because of the price point. He had a good game yesterday. I like lefties versus Arrieta. You got the wind blowing out a little bit, so I do like the Phillies once again. Then dropping down to the outfield, we have Aaron Judge, $5,400, righty power here versus Sheffield. I think that's kind of obvious there. George Springer for stacking with the Blue Jays versus Dean Kramer. On the season, he's only batting around 200, but he does have around a 300 ISO. And his price has risen. I remember when he was like upper 3K range for a little bit when he returned. Obviously, that didn't last too long, but should be betting cleanup for the Blue Jays and like all those guys today, like I've already mentioned. Bryce Harper, lefty versus Jake Arrieta. Like, if there's one guy that's probably going to go deep versus Arrieta, I think Bryce Harper is definitely the top option here. He's got plenty of power, kills right-handed pitching, and Jake Arrieta really, really struggles versus lefties over the past couple of seasons. Giancarlo Stanton, $4,800. If you can't quite afford Aaron Judge, I mean, he's not nearly $1,000 cheaper, but he's around half that, $4,800. Do like the upside here versus the lefty Justin Sheffield. Joey Gallo just kind of hunting home runs as a lefty versus Jose Urena, but if you are stacking the Rangers, wouldn't be that smart to leave off Joey Gallo, and it's over 200 ISO. The guy's obviously going to strike out quite a bit. Doesn't hit for a high batting average, but I do like the power upside here. Jack Peterson, $4,100. So I don't love the Cubs today because Aaron Nola is a good pitcher. He struck out 11 in his last matchup now. That did come with 7 runs that he gave up at the very end, which kind of sucked because the guy was looking like an absolute must-have on that slate. The next thing I knew, he just gave up 7 runs, which lost him like so many points. I didn't know what happened, but If you're going to use anybody versus Aaron Nola, I mean, Peterson leading off, $4,100, has power versus right-handed pitching. This could be the one guy that does give him trouble, and relative to his price point, I think he's a actually decent play. Can't imagine a lot of people are going to play him, so I think he'd be a good contrarian spot for a home run. Andrew McCutchen, $3,500. He had a pretty busy day yesterday. Wouldn't mind going back to the well there, but I do prefer the lefties versus Arrieta, but you can obviously still play McCutchen with over his 200 ISO this season. Batting average has been terrible, but the power's not been too bad. Audubon Herrera, $3,400. Last night, pretty late into the game, but it still counts all the same. $3,400. Should be leading off lefty on righty matchup versus Arrieta. Then David Peralta, if you need to go really cheap, think the Diamondbacks are maybe a decent contrarian stack tonight. Not that I ever really want to stack the Diamondbacks up too much, but 4.5 play team total. They're hitting in Arizona. John Gray's not a very good pitcher. The Rockies bullpen's not that great, only $2,600. Don't hate the idea of playing Peralta and a couple of those lefties on the Diamondbacks. But with that being said, guys, I think that'll be it for the video. So I hope it was helpful, and if it was, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Follow me on social media if you feel like that's something you want to do. And if you want to help support the channel over on Patreon and get access to the entire spreadsheet with all the colorful numbers and all the stats you'd ever need, and projections, the optimizer, rankings, Discord chat, and all that fun stuff that I do update throughout the day. Link is down below, but I think that'll be pretty much it. I will stop rambling. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the NBA Finals if you're watching those, and I'll see you guys in the next video.